Ubisoft has had a very, let's say, rough 2024. This hasn't been an ideal year for one of the biggest third-party publishers and developers of video games. I think they expected to hit huge metrics with their 2024 lineup, and it hasn't been all that well received. And I feel like there's a myriad of reasons for that when you look at some of the games, but things are getting, well, progressively worse for Ubisoft. And it seems like every week a new story comes out. And this brand new thing that just happened today really shows what problems Ubisoft are indeed having, because Tokyo Game Show is happening this week. All right, it's the biggest Japanese showcase of video games that there is, a huge event. Members of the press are there, fans are there. You're able to check out games, play games, and of course, there's a big game that takes place in Japan that's coming out very soon, Assassin's Creed Shadows. Assassin's Creed Shadows was, of course, scheduled to be at the Tokyo Game Show, but a mere few days before the event, Ubisoft has decided to pull out of Tokyo Game Show 2024. And I want to talk about this situation. I really want to talk about all of Ubisoft's 2024 and kind of just show you guys and paint a picture of how things are very volatile in the video game industry right now. So to kick things off, you had Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, which was a great game, but obviously a smaller game. And then you had one of your main games of 2024 with Skull and Bones, the quadruple A game that you tried to sell for $70 and nobody bought it. An absolute failure of a video game because a misreading of the marketplace. If this would have came out when it was intended to come out a couple of years ago, maybe it would have had a better chance. But obviously people are kind of souring on the online only multiplayer style of game. And so Skull and Bones was just sent out there to pretty much die. Star Wars Outlaws, okay? I reviewed Star Wars Outlaws. Ubisoft sent me a review copy of Star Wars Outlaws. Will they continue to send me review copies? I don't know. I hope so. It's always nice to cover new games before they release. But Star Wars Outlaws obviously has not gone as well as Ubisoft anticipated. Ubisoft themselves said that this was the highest budget of marketing for a video game that they have ever put together. There was tons of ads on television, streaming services, on websites and stuff like that. And really, the game wasn't good. Taking into account everything going on with the games and the controversies that were tied into it, you could strip that all away. And at your core, you just don't have a very fun Star Wars game, in my opinion. I know that there are people that like that game, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It was just, for me personally, it wasn't a Star Wars experience I wanted. Star Wars, to me, is always about the larger-than-life characters and the larger-than-life stories. I don't necessarily care about the pissants that live in these worlds that Star Wars create. I care about the heroes or the villains or the over-the-top characters that make Star Wars what it sets out to be and what it's always kind of been. But it's okay, okay, so you had Skull and Bones, that didn't go too well. Star Wars Outlaws, things aren't looking too great with that. But then we have the centerpiece, the crown jewel, the game that always sells well. But you couldn't avoid controversy with that game either. And that, of course, is Assassin's Creed Shadows. And this is a situation where it's been puzzling since the start. Now, say whatever you want about Yasuke. Was he a real samurai? Was he made up by a white dude back in 2012? I don't know that there is a definitive concrete answer. But even taking that aside, if the character is well written and the character is interesting and the game is interesting and it represents a time frame of Japan that it's trying to emulate, I think most people would just be like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. But if the game is good, the game is good. Who cares? You could kind of overlook things if a game is really well done, if you are a Japanese historian. I am not. I just like cool characters and fun gameplay mechanics. So it's not a huge deal to me. But I do realize that for people, especially in a specific region like Japan, they're going to look at this game with a critical lens. They're going to be looking not only at just the characters, but the artwork, the set pieces, the designs of things to make sure that it's representative of their history, because Japanese culture is very nationalist. There's nothing wrong with that, but Japanese people are very into Japanese culture. It's how they're brought up, it's how they're raised, it's what they learn. And when you make mistake after mistake after mistake of authenticating Japanese culture things, and it seems like you don't necessarily really care about honoring, the time setting that you're trying to emulate within this game and things that should and shouldn't be in the game, you're going to upset people. But I find it funny how everyone's been downplaying sort of the problems with Assassin's Creed Shadows as some sort of grift thing. Now, yes, there are people that definitely attach to it as a grift mentality, and they overanalyze things and they speak for other people and stuff like that. But what ends up happening is if you just write off every single complaint, then you're not actually looking at the root of the problem. You're not looking at why the complaint even exists in the first place. You're saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And while it might not be a big deal to you, there are people that it could be a big deal to. It's kind of like the Yasuke thing. To me, it's not a huge deal. But to someone who lives in Japan or studies Japanese history or is a Japanese nationalist, like is kind of taught there, it's probably a little bit jarring. It's probably a situation where you're like, hey, this is incorrect. You finally brought Assassin's Creed to Japan, and now you're messing up all of these things. It got so bad that Ubisoft had to make an apology to the Japanese audience, which many gaming journalists just wrote off as, oh, they're not really apologizing to them. They're apologizing to white men and, white grifter men. And it's like, why does everything have to be so black and white? Like, why can't people accept that there are Japanese people who probably aren't thrilled about how Japanese culture is being displayed in this game and who probably aren't thrilled with the character choice? I don't think that says anything about them. I think it just says that they're in touch with the history and they understand things. And, that's just how it is. I don't understand why we have to have everything is a grift or everything is awesome. Like, why there can't be some sort of middle ground. But Tokyo Game Show, like I said, is the biggest display for Japanese games, for Japanese culture, for displaying games from Japanese publishers and developers. And Assassin's Creed Shadows is a Japanese game that takes place in feudal Japan with real characters from feudal Japan that's supposed to be emulating a feudal Japan region, and they're not showing it there. If you sit there and say, oh, well, they're just doing it for the reason they're doing it is because there's something wrong with the game. There's something fundamentally wrong with the game. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean from a Japanese historical perspective? Does that mean from a gameplay perspective? I don't know. I haven't played the game yet. I've seen trailers. Everything seems fine enough, looks Assassin's Creedy, but I don't know what that issue is. But there obviously is an issue if you are pulling out of the event, if you are completely pulling out of this event. Are they going to delay this game? Are they going to have to change things up within this game? If it is just a small section of grifters that are upset about this, why would you pull out of Tokyo Game Show? And I'm not trying to, say that the grifters are right in this situation, because I don't think we know the reason quite yet as to why this isn't showing up at Tokyo Game Show. But whatever the reason is, that doesn't really matter, because the end result is this is not showing up at Tokyo Game Show. And now we have a situation where one of the largest third-party game developers and publishers has had two major strikes on them this year. Two major follies with Skull and Bones and Star Wars Outlaws. And now it looks like they might have another strike with Assassin's Creed Shadows and strike out. But there is no video game industry crash, RGT. Everything is fine within the video game industry. Granted, we've had more layoffs this year than we've ever had before. We've had more studio closures than we've ever had before. Games are coming to a trickling pace of releases. Games are not hitting metrics that they should have hit if the video game industry was thriving. Game development cost is too high. And now one of the biggest third-party studios is in trouble with their game releases not hitting certain metrics. But no, everything, it's so funny how people like try to throw little quips at me and they're like, the video game industry's fine. The video game industry is not a crash. Like, don't you understand? I'm not saying that it's a crash to where video games don't exist like it was in 1983 in the United States. Video games still existed in other regions like Japan and in Europe. The thing of it is you're seeing a decline of the video game industry, a steady decline where people are losing jobs, studios are closing down, games are failing to hit metrics. It's all coming to a boiling point to where something has to give. And you are in the situation where something is about to give. You are in the cracks of the foundation of the video game industry right before it crumbles, but you're still in it. And unless something miraculous happens, it's going to continue to be that way until we get to the boiling point where everything just, explodes like Mount Vesuvius, and then you're in a terrible situation. In my opinion, though. But Ubisoft, man, things aren't looking good. And I still want to play Assassin's Creed Shadows. I still planned on reviewing it. I like Assassin's Creed games. Like, there really hasn't been a bad Assassin's Creed game, so I'm not sure how you could make it a bad game. But something is up with this game. Something is terribly wrong with this game to the point of where they're like, yo, we're not doing Tokyo Game Show anymore. Because that costs money. You had to pay to show up at Tokyo Game Show. You had to pay for floor space and stuff like that. That's another loss for Ubisoft. The industry's fine, though, folks. Everything is fine. It's a little dog in the burning room. Yeah, everything's fine. Crazy to me. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think is going on with this game? Why do you think Ubisoft has pulled out of Tokyo Game Show and has pulled Assassin's Creed Shadows out of Tokyo Game Show? Could it be because maybe the Japanese audience really doesn't like that game? I mean, probably, but hey, who's to say, really? Who's to say? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.